Thanks, Stephen. And trying to stay on time here. I had to winnow down about 30 slides into 5. But they're tricks. Okay, so this was very interesting, the previous talk, if I can make one remark. This mind reading, sometimes we feel like we're being mind read by our appliances. Whoever in the room uses Google now might have noticed the spookiness of how Google knows exactly what you're going to do next and where you're going to be. So we're going pretty far along that route already. What surprises me is how easy we accept that. How like after a while we don't find it spooky anymore. We find it kind of convenient, rather scary. Okay, how do I advance this? Okay, so I'm going to just give a sample of a couple of projects that have to do with what's sometimes called cyber infrastructure tools that hopefully make the life of scientists in particular easier as they deal with various issues in scientific data management. So the first project that I want to talk about is called Curator, and the K is partially misspelled, of course, and partially due to a history of both myself coming from Germany. We like K's a lot, and where folks over here like C's. And then also, our first prototype really was based on a system called Kepler, and that fellow starts with a K. So when you look at scientific data, here's a good example of biodiversity data from natural history, museums and collections. Sometimes they have a lot of data quality issues. Data is all over the map, literally. That means you have data points where certain specimens supposedly were collected, and then you find out that, well, we don't really have these points on Earth, or they're funny places in the ocean where you find some land plants or sort of ground-dwelling animals. So sometimes things are really wrong with the data, and it can be as benign as sort of a swapping of the latitude and longitude of data. So when you ingested your data into your system, you try to do some data analysis, maybe you got the columns mixed up. And there's all kinds of other issues, scientific names that biologists use to identify species. It's a little bit like ontologies. The pleasure is there's so many of them, so you can choose which scientific name according to which classification. I just came back earlier this week from a project meeting, and I talked to a colleague, we're going to see him at the end, who just did an alignment of 11 taxonomies over the course of over 100 years. So the vocabulary of this scientific community, focusing on now beats me, this particular one could be beetles and weevils and so on, has changed somewhat, and in his paper he describes how these names have changed over time. So scientific names that were supposedly uniquely identifying species, they don't really do that job, and so we have issues like those that we want to address with our tools. So there are 2 NSF-funded projects, one coming to an end, one has just started up. The Filtered Push project is about providing data quality control tools and curation tools for the community by sort of allowing users to subscribe to their sort of species or taxa of interest, then apply certain methods to it, also really pushing back annotations into the system, sort of a federation of repositories that have that data. And this is a collaboration with Harvard, with the Museum of Comparative Zoology, as well as the herbarium there. Okay, so what are we doing about this? So this is a early prototype from a couple of years ago that shows a little bit of the legacy here also. So the high-level idea is that we built computational tools called workflows that are cobbling together different computational steps. These green boxes, we call them sometimes actors. They're really just services or calls, function calls, procedures. You see data going into this pipeline. You see in the upper left sort of a spreadsheet or comma-separated values file going in. Then the data is subjected to certain filters. Yeah, but good filters here. We want to locate, for example, whether this lat-long position is indeed close by from what the place name says. So we can use gazetteers, for example, things like that. There's global name services, so there's repositories out there where scientific names are being sort of organized and quality controlled, and then we want to, again, subject our collection data relative to that other data there, and then flag it accordingly. Flowering times of North America, so phenology data. There's this filtered push network, sort of the community of experts themselves that we want to bring in. And then you see our, slightly dystopian future here. There's a person on the left, human curation. He feels literally like the cog in the wheel, the cog in the system. we sent to these poor fellows basically their job, say, hey, here's a data set that we try to automatically curate, but here's a particular list of names that we're not sure about, and so we have sort of certain color coding and explanations of what might be wrong with that data, and that the human curator can actually make the final call. So this was an early prototype that we developed. We use a little bit the big brother Google here to our own advantage in this case. We also keep track of provenance, that is of course the history, the lineage of data and the processing history of data, so that we can afterwards, when we make a proposal to the curator and say, hey, here's your possibly improved data set, the human can really make the final call and can see what changes were actually applied. Do I like those changes, and how did they come about? Sort of which, for example, which name service has recommended this particular change, or which human curator has made this change. Yeah? This workflow, nice as it looks like, has some issues with scalability, not just because we use Google and we use spreadsheets on the web and things like that, but also if you have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands records that you want to process, and you rely maybe on remote services that you have to call over the internet, that's not a lot of fun. This can take a very long time, and so we needed to think about ways to scale that better up, and so we're working now in the Curator project. This is the last bullet here, on basically a new toolkit that tries to deal with these scalability issues. Okay, a second project here I want to mention is Scope, Synthesized Knowledge of Past Environment, a fun project when you work with scientific data. I can recommend it highly as a career for computer scientists and information scientists. It's a lot of fun. So here, these folks are trying to sort of reconstruct the climate from about 1,000 years ago or more. They do data integration using tree ring data. So if you know how tree rings work, you have to stitch them together over time. And then they run climate models to see, well, how wet and how dry and how warm was it in the various places. So for example, in the Four Corners region in the Southwest, a place you want to go and visit in spring. It's very nice there in spring. In winter, when it's rather cold and cloudy here. And so they do this recreation of the past climate. And so the question was, well, how can we make their life easier? The Scope project is really doing a pilot to find out what are their computational needs, what are their tool needs, cyber infrastructure needs. Now, one of their sort of, can I say, star junior scientists there is an avid R programmer. So he has implemented this wonderful tool, all in this scripting language called R. And one idea was, well, that's good and wonderful, and he's really good at that. But how can we make this, what he's doing, sort of more accessible to the rest of the community, maybe people that are not as good as him with R, and also how can we document it better? So this is the part about process documentation. And one idea was, well, maybe we can throw in some structured comments, a little bit like Javadoc, for those of you who know what that is. Basically, inside of the script, inside of the programs that do this wonderful science, let's embed some simple comments, very simple, and then try to recreate the workflow that is implicit in the script. And we call this approach, Yes Workflow. It's sort of a grassroots effort, not really funded a lot by any of these wonderful projects, Scope that I just mentioned, the Curator project that I mentioned before, or Data One, but everybody's sort of pitching together, coming around to sort of this open source code idea. So there's software out there that we're sort of pitching all together, together and put our efforts together, and we can then, in a rather simple effort, create for the scientists, based on their annotations that they put in the scripts, recreate the workflow that's sort of in their mind. Yeah, another form of mind reading, I guess. In this case, asking the scientists to put in some of their thoughts into the comments. And then, so what we see here is the green boxes are computational steps. The yellowish rounded boxes are the data items. And then we can use this, for example, again, to put in a scientific paper, say, you want to know about the script? Well, here's the script, look at the code, but here's also a pretty picture derived from the code in an automatic fashion based on the annotations by the scientist. And then we can do further things there as well. Okay, the last slide here, coming back to another kind of curator. So this is Professor Nico Franz from Arizona State University, who I was visiting earlier this week. And he's a curator of insects. So he's a biologist, entomologist, really, and in particular, he's into weevils. And things that he's doing is he's, for example, aligning literally these taxonomies, say 10, 11 taxonomies over the course of 100 years. The first one was, 1800 something. Created, and he's trying to align them, make sense of them, how data that is annotated or referenced relative to these old taxonomies, how that would look today. And he has been doing that for a while, but only recently has he been able to use computational tools to find, for example, inconsistencies in his own alignments. So he understands stuff very well. He puts things together, says, all right, here this corresponds to this is a subset of that, that's a special case, here they overlap. He puts all of that together, and in the end, our system tells him, well, Mr. Expert, thank you, but this is logically inconsistent. It's just impossible. Yeah? So you must have made a mistake somewhere in your annotation. And he can then go in with our system and sort of debug his own thinking and his own logical articulation. So we can deal with ambiguities and inconsistencies, and we use some logic methods to do so. I think I'll end on that. This was really just a sample of a couple of research projects I'm involved with, and hopefully many of you, or some of you, can join me in some of these projects. We have interesting problems there. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Dr. Ludäscher? Don't be shy. We're all friends here. Dr. Chico.
Bertram, what exactly is being aligned?
What's being aligned?
Yeah.
Sorry, I guess it was in the other 29 or 25 slides. Sorry. Okay, so thanks for asking that question. So let me get out the other slide now. So we have two taxonomies. So we have trees, biological trees. And what the taxonomists and systematists typically do is they look at the leaves, at the tips, at the species level. And then we often have identical names, so same genus, same species name, but according to different authors. And the authors over time have, of course, classified plants and insects and so on differently. And so whenever you create a new taxonomy, a new revision of an existing taxonomy, create your own one, you sort of change things in the tree a little bit here and there. And the alignments are precisely that. You specify, you explain why you think this one species or variety should actually be more closely related over here, so over there. So it's very closely related to phylogenetics and informed by that data. But these are the guys sort of really meticulous about where things go in the tree, the taxonomists. Yeah.
Any other questions? I actually have one. I'm not going to hog the podium. So one thing that I've noticed, as you know, I do work on the humanities sides of some of these problems, and getting actual practitioners to buy into these tools is a problem in my community. Can you speak to how well what we call real scientists, in air quotes, want to work with the tools or not work with the tools?
Yeah, that is a little bit of a challenge. This particular project, the last one, is actually a computer science project funded by SAIS, and was sort of more targeted at sort of really researching some of the underlying computational problems and reasoning problems. But we were lucky to have this one guy who got really excited about it. But it still remains a challenge to get the community on board. Not sure what the recipe is. You can try to put more resources at it. What we try to do in some of the projects is that we switch our attention. We like end users. End users are very important, but sometimes it's really hard to get that crowd. It's easier sometimes to talk to the tool makers themselves. So talk to the early adopters and pioneers in the area and bring them on board, and then they drag the rest along, hopefully. So that's our hope.
Oh, you have a question? Okay. This way for the talking stick.
Talking snake. No, sorry.
Can we apply the logic-based knowledge representation in demography and sociology? And are there any of your projects touching on these fields, or only biology and what else?
Yeah. What was the first one you said? Sociology, and the one before?
Demography. Sociology.
Yeah. So what's going on under the hood is a very particular logic reasoning engine that we're using called answer set programming. It's something that has broad applications in sort of logic-based AI. There's no particular reason why we couldn't apply that in other situations. In fact, we're looking desperately for other applications to try this out that are not just sort of biological taxonomy. So if you have tree-like data, we have a ready-made tool for you. If you have other reasoning problems, we can probably develop a tool together for that other use case, or for this other community. But if you have trees and you want to align them, I think we have something ready to go, pretty much. But for these other problems, I'd be interested to learn more.
Illinois.